black? Well, I'm Egyptian. Oh, so you're African? Yeah, so you're black. What's this guy think? Decide right now. Black or no black, the world's worst game show. It's okay, usually people just panic and say mix, and I'm like, of what? Herbs and spices? Be specific. Because here's the thing, I'm North African, that does sound kind of black. But on the other hand, white people have to start somewhere, right? We're all from Africa, you guys can just pop up at a farmer's market in Vermont, you have to start somewhere. Maybe I'm just how white people used to look. Maybe I'm the prototype. The Ford Model T of honkies.
Let's read what Egyptologist7 says here. He refuses to even entertain the idea that an introgression of Levantines into Egypt and Nubia, along with domesticates and agriculture, took place before the Neolithic, and instead favors the defunct Afrocentric view of a blacks-only Egypt, where its founders could have only been black. Well, Keita has never called the Egyptians black. And Keita has never said there was never any type of Levantine introgression into Egypt and Nubia. Let's actually read what Keita says about the population that created the Egyptian civilization. So let's read Keita's opinion on who created the Egyptian civilization. It will not only contradict Egyptologist7, but also Afrocentrics who are looking to claim Egypt as black. Keita states here, the peopling of what is now the Egyptian Nile Valley, judging from archaeological and biological data, was apparently the result of a complex interaction between coastal northern Africans, Neolithic Saharans, Nilotic hunters, and riverine Proto-Nubians, with some influence and migration from the Levant. Also, just to let you know, coastal northern Africans, Keita later on states, have southern European genes and genetic and history and ancestry, along with other African ancestry. Keita continues to say the major variability of early Egyptians is thus seen to have been mainly established in the proto-pre-dynastic period by the settling of all of these peoples. So the settling of all these peoples created the Egyptian civilization before the first dynasty. And he is basically saying it was mainly established during the proto-pre-dynastic period, which is basically the formation of the government that was going to create the first dynasty of Egypt. Does that sound like Keita is not including Levantines into the Egyptian population or the Egyptian society?
People that we know are there. It does not mean, as you have heard correctly from me, does not mean that there was no back migration. What it means is that the concept of the Egyptian is assembled on African soil. Now, the thing is, I would imagine that some of the people will tell you that the Egyptians were simply, if they use a word like black or simply indigenous, that many of them are quoting Sheikh Anta Diop. Is that right?
Yeah, a lot of them.
Okay, but then they don't know Sheikh Anta Diop very well, because Sheikh Anta Diop clearly says in the translated volume that was put together by Mercer Cook The African Origin of Civilization, which is based primarily on the French book, The Antiquity of Black Civilization, or something like Black Nations and Cultures, from 1953, 54, 55. Sheikh Anta Diop says there was an infiltration of whites from Palestine during the Amrashan period. Sheikh Anta Diop says that. That's in the English edition too. So if you have a copy of the book, just go to find those pages, and then the next time somebody says that, they say, well, wait a minute, even Sheikh Anta Diop says it. He says it straight up.
In which period was that?
In the Amrashan, otherwise called Nakata too.
Okay. Oh, so in the pre-dynastic?
Yeah. So Sheikh Anta
So here we have Egyptologist 7 showing that A group Nubians are not a part of the Saharan Nilotic population complex, using anthropological evidence and dental evidence. However, Egyptologist 7 did not read it properly. It says the conclusion by extension also has the effect for some readers of suggesting that ancient Egyptian culture was not of Nilotic African origin, did not primarily emerge in the valley from local developments and ideas, and shows no connection with other Africans. Keita is talking about Nilotic culture. And truthfully, if you read some of his other papers, he's talking about Saharan, Sudanic, Nilotic culture. He's not specifically here talking about anthropology and biology. He's talking about culture. But you respond with anthropology. Now, yes, Keita does say Nilotics were a part of the anthropology of the Egyptians, but in this part here, in this statement that he's making, he's specifically mainly talking about the culture. And we're going to show you the reason why he says it's a Nilotic African culture. So let's read here. Eugene Struhl says, in this connection, we have to mention that Egyptologists have found in the Badarian and other pre-dynastic cultures of Upper Egypt some material and ideological evidence of Southern or Sudanic African elements. The Badarian pottery is connected with the pottery of the Khartoum Neolithic culture, which originated probably from the ceramics of the early Khartoum culture. So this is where Keita's coming from with the Nilotic culture connection with Egypt. And that here we have Egyptologist 7 pointed out in the paper that there was Natufian ancestry possibly in the Western Desert. It states, under this hypothesis, the one presented above, Neolithic Western Desert inhabitants could have been related to the Levantine population and be the sole people repopulating the Nile Valley. The thing is that we have samples, anthropological samples of Neolithic Western Desert inhabitants. One of the first that we know about is Nabta Playa, and the second is Gebel Ramla. So here we have the results from the Neolithic Western Desert. It states, the paper states, concerning biological affinity, this skeletal sample exhibits cranial and dental heterogeneity. meaning an admixture. That is, some skeletons exhibit fierce sub-Saharan-like features, whereas others display more northern affiliated traits. Egyptologist7 loves to try to make Keita look like he's manipulating data. But Egyptologist7 does it all day long. And I'm going to give you an example of the easiest example to show that Egyptologist7 is manipulative, hides information, and does not tell the truth, and is racist. Here is an example of Egyptologist7 being deliberately misleading and lying. On the left, you can see a sub-Saharan skull, and on the right, you can see a Badarian skull. Egyptologist7 is trying to make it seem like the Badarian skulls are different from the sub-Saharan skulls. But unless if you are the type of person who actually studies and read things, you won't find out that Egyptologist7 is being deceptive and lying. This, yes, is a Badarian skull, but it's not the only one. If you look at the bottom of where it says Badarian, it says Strawul, 1971. This image comes from a book from Eugene Strawul. And let's go to that book. Let's go to that paper. So this is the paper Egyptologist7 got the image from. Let's see if we can find it here. See, 1971, Eugene Strawul. There it goes. Here's the image. And guess what's right next to it? Another image. And let's take a closer look at this image that Egyptologist7 does not show. Wow, look at that. What is that? Of the total of 117 skulls, 15 were found to be marked Europoroid. 9 of these were of the gray cell meditative type. 6 were of the very robust structure reminiscent of the North African Cro-Magnon type. 8 skulls were clearly Negroid and were close to the Negro type occurring in East Africa. The majority of 94 skulls showed mixed Europoroid Negroid features. Now, I presented this to Egyptologist7. And the response that I got was that there was no data for this. But if you read the paper, there clearly was data. But I know most people who watch Egyptologist7 video won't pick this up and read it. Keita never denied a Levantine presence, and correctly, Egyptologist7 shows that there was a Levantine presence in Lower Egypt. But in the same paper, it also states this: recent geochemical analysis carried out on obsidian objects from pre-dynastic and early dynastic contexts at Kar El Kabir, Abydos, Nakada, and Hierakonpolis suggests that this material originated mainly from sources located to the south of Egypt, either in Ethiopia or the Yemen highlands. These results were unexpected given the widely attested connections with the Near East. So clearly, the Egyptians had connections with more southerly areas of Africa and Yemen. Let's read what Egyptologist7 says. If sub-Saharan so-called tropical Africans made an exit out of Africa There will be evidence of it in ancient specimens across Eurasia, moreover in the Levant, as an exit point. But there is a void. But this is completely false. Let's just take a look. We notice that Egyptologist7 considers Brace as a good reference as an anthropologist. But Brace contradicts everything that E7 has said. Brace says, Kafeza is an unlikely proto-Cro-Magnon, but it makes a fine model for the ancestors of modern sub-Saharan Africans, along with the microfauna at the Kafeza site. The human remains are best regarded as evidence for a temporary intrusion of African elements into the Middle East. This clearly contradicts E7. And Kafeza represents the pattern still found in sub-Saharan Africa, particularly West Africa. Kafeza is a logical representative of the ancestral form for sub-Saharan Africans. This is the same Brace that said the Epio-Paleolithic Natufian of Israel, from whom the Neolithic realm was assumed to rise, has a clear link to sub-Saharan Africa. Come on, E7, give it up. So let's read a little bit about the Nile Delta and the cultures that was there. The cultures of Lower Egypt. The cultural traits of Merimda Beni Salama place the Delta Neolithic between the Sahara and the Near East, with very strong connections with Levantine tradition. This here in itself is clearly showing you that there is still an Sahara African cultural element in the Delta. Not just a Middle Eastern one. So this shows that there was an African element in the Delta. So let's read another paper about Lower Egypt and the connection with the Levant. Here we can read, according to F. Hassan, farming was introduced to the Delta by migrants from the East. Same thing Keita said. However, their movement was not linked to the mass migrations from Southwest Asia. Same thing Keita is also saying. Keita is saying that there was migration, but a trickle migration. It was not a mass movement of people and culture from Syria into the Nile Valley. It's not a mass movement of people from the Levant into the Delta. Lower Egypt is claimed to have been gradually infiltrated by drifters and refugees over a very long period of time. So this is the point that Keita's making. Keita's not saying that there was no Near Easterners in the foundation of Egypt. What he's saying is that there was no mass migration. So let's connect what we just read from those two papers to what Keita is saying. Here Keita is stating the archaeology of Neolithic and pre-dynastic Egypt does not support mass migration from outside of Africa, just like the other paper was saying. The early evidence for farming in the Nile Valley indicates that local people incorporated Near Eastern domesticates into an indigenous foraging subsistence strategy that over time developed into more reliance on farming. This is not consistent with a Neolithic revolution that would have occurred if there had been mass settlements by farmers. This is basically what the same thing the other paper was saying, that there wasn't a mass migration. It's not saying that there wasn't Middle Easterners or Near Easterners coming into Nile Valley, but it wasn't happening in a mass migration. They were coming, they were there, they was intermixing, but it wasn't a mass migration like was happening with the Hyksos during the Middle Kingdom. Keita continues to say, in northern Egypt, the earliest sites evidencing food production at Fayum and Merimde showed some Near Easterners, but not European influence during the earlier part of the Neolithic. So clearly, Keita is showing that there was Near Eastern influence in the Neolithic era of northern Egypt. Chronologically later, Neolithic artifacts from the same sites indicate a strong regional African, Saharan Western Desert influence. That's the same thing that was said in the first paper, that in the Nile Delta, there was a Saharan and Near Eastern cultural connection. So Egyptologist 7, the paper that you're posting does not contradict anything that Keita says, because Keita never denied a Near Eastern presence in the foundation of ancient Egypt. What he was clearly stating was that the Egyptian civilization was formed on African soil with Africans partaking in it. And of course, Near Easterners partaking in that formation also. And that's before the first dynasty. So he acknowledged that before the first dynasty. So for Afrocentrics, that works against them, because that means when the pyramids were being built, Near Easterners or people who had mixed with the Africans already there were already a part of creating the pyramids and everything that we see there in Egypt. So this works against Afrocentrics and Eurocentrics. But here we're going to listen to Keita himself say that the Egyptian civilization was formed in Africa with mixed ancestry. And of course, ancestry came from somewhere else, which is Asia.
To create the fundamental basis of modern humanity. Ancient Nubia and ancient Egypt share roots, common cultural roots in Northeast Africa, in the Sahara, and along the Nile Valley. The ancient Egyptians and the ancient Nubians can both be described, especially in the earlier periods, as being descendants of Northeast African indigenous populations. As one writer said, all of these people are Africans, and I define Africans as people whose biological histories have emerged and their identities have emerged in Africa, and where any mixing that took place on African soil. The Egyptians did not come from any place else other than the Nile Valley. Their identities and any other ancestry that they may have had were all forged together in that space